Hello and welcome to Contra Mundum. Today we are discussing the situation on the border in Texas. Governor Greg Abbott is violating a Supreme Court order to allow the Border Patrol to remove the barriers at Eagle Pass and a few other places. And the Biden administration has given him a 24-hour ultimatum, which should be up in just a few minutes here, actually. So we're going to see what happens. Something is happening. Something is happening. I'm Andrew Isker, and here's the other host of Contra Mundum, CJ Engel. Hello, CJ. How are you?
Good. Ready to do this. We just got done talking with the American Reformer guys. Theirs is pre-recorded, so we get more live action here. But it's going to be interesting because, yeah, like you said, it's expiring right now. And so what's the Biden administration going to do next? Hopefully they walk away with the tail between their legs. We'll see.
We shall see. Yes. It's interesting because this ultimatum, and we mentioned it earlier when we were with American Reformer, but like an ultimatum it's weird. It's bizarre that they would issue a public ultimatum, do this in 24 hours or there's going to be consequences. Well, normally they don't do that kind of stuff. Normally those things happen behind closed doors, and if you have actual leverage that you're willing to employ. Yeah. And so it seems like, okay, what are they actually going to do? Are they going to say, all right, all of your federal highway funding, that's being cut by executive? Can they even do that? I don't even know. I mean, the question of can they even do that is an odd one too, because they do whatever they want until they are told they can't.
But the Abbott administration didn't even respond to it, did they? Or did that? Yeah. So the letter preceded the ultimatum.
The letter preceded the ultimatum, and
yeah. So they just ignore it. Sorry, I didn't get your email. It's like that. I was golfing. What's going on?
I was out of the office.
It's a sign of weakness. It's a sign of weakness. I mean, the Biden administration. It's a sign of like just desperate weakness where they're shouting into the void. You guys better do this. It's like, okay, who cares? Who are you again? That's the type of attitude that we need. I mean, these federal government people are not in a position of strength. And they need to realize that. Not only does Abbott need to realize that, but all these other governors need to grow a spine and realize that. And they need to follow up their letters of adherence with actual action. They need to stand by the guns, which is something the Republican Party is notoriously bad at. But maybe for the first time, they'll do something when they can see just how weak the Biden administration is.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, we kind of game planned this out a little bit. 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago now, with Josh Abitoy on a previous episode, where they had just there just was another motion filed before the SCOTUS that was going to be accepted, apparently. And it's like, okay, where does it go from here? I was somewhat skeptical of Abbott. I thought, like, this guy's been pretty weak throughout his term as governor. And he's going to back down, right? I thought the most likely scenario he's going to back down, and that's a fair thing to assume, because they've always backed down. Right, Republicans always have backed down in these circumstances, but instead he's doubled down every step of the way, and so now it's reaching a sort of crunch time where, all right, well, what is the Biden administration going to do? What do you think, CJ? What is this ultimatum going to be? What are they going to say?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know exactly politically. They're in a really bad situation. But first of all, I mean, it's election year, right? That's why they either come across as weak, or they come across as obviously sending in federal government resources to open the border and let like migrants come in and flood their own domestic territory that they're charged with protecting by the federal Constitution. So that's a really bad place to be politically. But on the other hand, it was just, I mean, the case is still going. The hearing is right before November, I think, for the case. So I don't think we can say yet that we've seen. First of all, we haven't seen the last of this. Second of all, I don't think Abbott's really been under a lot of pressure yet. I mean, it was just a single decision that the federal government was allowed to put up or to take down the fencing. That's it. That's the only thing that happened so far. So, I mean, the real test is still yet to come.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, the fact that all of these state governors have supported Texas actually really helps the case in the Supreme Court, even though, like, obviously that's not going to make its way into the actual oral arguments before the Supreme Court. They still feel the political pressure of all of these states saying, no, something needs to be done. The country is being invaded. This is an invasion, right? If a bunch of unarmed people, go and take an unscheduled tour of the Capitol building a couple years ago, and that's called an insurrection, well, then this definitely is an invasion, right? It is. Like, foreign people occupying space in your country unlawfully, right? That's an invasion. Or even just looking at how people talked about the Russian invasion of Ukraine, right? The exact same rhetoric, right? And it's the same thing. Foreign people coming into your land by the millions. There's way more people that have invaded the United States than Russia sent to invade Ukraine. That's what's occurring.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
So, and that's a clause in the Constitution that Abbott invoked in his statement yesterday, which is under the Constitution, if a state is invaded, the state has the power to repel the invasion. They don't have to wait for the federal government to do it. That's the whole reason the state signed up for the Constitution in the first place, to get the assurances that if the federal government doesn't repel an invasion of their state for whatever reason, they still have the sovereignty to be able to do it themselves.
Yeah.
It's a good question. Yeah. But let's read it for the audio.
Okay, so it just says, can we discuss the reasoning behind Republicans rejecting the border funding bill recently? Was it because of Ukraine? I hear a lot of people saying this could have been avoided, but I'm not convinced. So yes, the bill is full of all kinds of disastrous things. That's how these bills are done. They're like teased out, and they're full of funding for a whole bunch of other things and bad ideas in order to play political gotcha games later on, which is exactly what's happening now. But the ultimate question is, this actually has nothing to do with the funding. This has to do with whether or not the federal government is allowed to come in and tear down wiring that was put up.
Well, yeah,
that's the question right now.
And beyond that, it's not even a question of, does the Border Patrol have adequate funding to enforce the border? Probably not, because they need a lot more. But even just to do the things that they should be doing at this point, the Biden administration is not allowing them to do it. Right? They're not allowing deportations.
Yeah, exactly.
They're ordering them to open up these points of entry.
It has nothing to do with funding. I mean, the federal government is expending resources to try to make sure the border is open.
Yes, exactly. And so the question itself is not one of funding necessarily, although the Congressman Thomas Massey had a tweet about this, that the House could solve it just by tying funding to the Border Patrol to enforcement. Right? You could do that. The will in the Congress is absolutely not there to do that, however, and that's the problem. But popularly, the people want this. This is an incredibly popular issue. I mean, over 60% of the country wants mass deportations, which is something, if you told me that 20 years ago, when we were in like college, if you would have said to me, immigration is going to be the biggest issue in the country, and 60% of the country wants mass deportations, I would have said, no way. There's no way.
Yeah, this is exactly
precisely.
This is what I was saying, is like the policy, it has nothing to do with funding. It has to do with the fact that the federal government is ordering them to take down the wire that they put up. So that's kind of what's going on here. So
Border Patrol says they have the resources, but policy is preventing them from using it. Yeah, exactly. That's 100% it. And this follow up here from the New Christendom. So even if the funding would have passed, it would have made no difference whatsoever. Exactly. Because you saw this video of Mitt Romney, who's usually a pretty cool customer, getting pretty fiery, getting pretty angry, and saying that this is just all Donald Trump. He's trying to make this issue in order to get elected. We could solve it. Right. Which is a complete lie.
He's so mad that he was passed over.
Yeah. Oh, exactly. He hates Trump. And a lot of it is like, what's he talking about? He's talking about like the Langford deal. That's it, where they're going to amnesty millions of people, right? And Trump torpedoed it. He shot it down. It's like, good. You're a snake that hates our country and is actively fighting against the people of our country. I want you to be mad. So seeing Mitt Romney angry, it's a good day. It's a very good day when you see him angry.
Yeah.
And so it's the same thing with the funding of the border. Oh no, that has nothing to do with that at all. Um, yes, this is another good point in the chat here from Altec. There are more effective things Abbott could be doing to repel invasion, like attacking orgs, feeding, employing, and housing invaders. Is he just starting his 2028 presidential run? I mean, maybe. I mean, some of this does feel like he's auditioning for the presidency. Like you saw the pictures. He's going to like he's in India right now with Modi. Right? Why is
Right.
a governor of a
Right.
state doing the? Why do they do this stuff? I mean, it's like Ron DeSantis going to Israel, right?
Mhm.
Why do they do it? Because they want to be president.
Mhm.
And so maybe that's just what it's all about. It's all political theater, right? Maybe, possibly. But you're right. What they should be doing is you should take Bill Paxton. Is it Ken Paxton? Bill Paxton is the actor. Ken Paxton, the Attorney General, who is great, and the Uniparty in Texas hated him and tried to impeach him.
Mhm.
Just sick him on all the NGOs that are bringing them here because right it's not just people from Central America that have walked there. You have tens of thousands of people from China, from Africa, from the Middle East coming in, and somehow they get to Mexico, to the U.S. southern border. Well, how does that happen? Who's paying for it? Who's
Mhm.
doing these things?
Exactly. This is the point that I made, when we were on before. This is why like people like Orban have been so successful in their immigration policy because they've attacked things at the root. You don't
Yeah,
just put up a wall. I mean, putting up a wall is fine, whatever, but that doesn't actually address the core issue, which is that there are international interests at play that are funding and fueling and facilitating the transfer of all these people across the world to these
yeah.
borders. So these are financiers. They're like they conglomerate resources and spend them in certain ways to get these people here. I mean, all this is really explicitly outlined in Michelle Malcolm's book. Did you read that one? The Open Borders Incorporated?
Oh, yeah, I haven't yet. I've heard of it.
Yeah,
Though.
I
Yeah.
highly recommend that. I mean, she lays bare, all the different NGOs and organizations and charities and nonprofits that are all involved in this thing. It's a very lucrative business for these people, and they're profiting from it.
And
And
it's hundreds
millions,
of millions of tax dollars being
yeah,
used.
hundreds. It's not. Yeah, it's hundreds of millions of tax dollars being used. But it's also like people need to sit back and think. Do you know how hard it is to walk like with your like if anyone has small children to walk 100 miles with them?
Walk 10
I mean,
miles with your kids.
yeah, like
It's nuts.
these people are traveling thousands of miles. They
Yeah.
are being funded. They're poor. They don't have the resources to do this themselves. This is obviously orchestrated, and you have to have nefarious interests if you're denying this kind of
Yeah,
thing.
if I wanted to take a plane ticket right now, take a plane ticket from Mexico City to somewhere in Africa, I couldn't just take that money out of my bank account and do it. Like I don't have the money to do that myself. And I have a job and good income and things like that. You probably can't either, like we can't just I don't have the resources to do that myself. And I'm a first world American. And here you have people from the third world that the per capita GDP of these places is like hundreds of dollars, right?
Mhm.
That's how much the median income of these places makes is few $100s a year. How are they getting here? How are they able to spend thousands of dollars on plane tickets and get into Mexico to do this, and then be able to have food and water and resources to walk hundreds of miles to the border, right? Someone's facilitating all of this stuff. This
Mhm.
isn't just organic. This isn't
Yeah.
just a bunch of people fleeing war torn wherever to come to America for asylum. That's not what is going on. I mean, that's the
Mhm.
lie that we're being told constantly. But you don't get from Africa or China or from the Middle East to the southern border of the United States just randomly.
Yeah,
That's not what
just
happened.
fleeing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you know enough to answer this question?
Yeah, what does the Texas chain of command look like with the Texas National Guard? What are the chances they become federalized, thus ending Texas's defiance? Yeah, I mean, ordinarily it's the governor that's at the top,
Yeah.
but if they are federalized, then they're part of the DoD structure, and that's one of the threats that has been offered from the Biden administration is they'll just federalize the National Guard, and it's like, I mean, that's a huge step to do
Mhm.
that. I mean, a massive escalation on the part of the regime if they go that course. Um, but it's possible. I mean, this is what we said, 2 weeks ago with Abbott, is they have a tremendous amount of power, and they always double down. They always double. They don't. These people do not back down on anything, especially in an issue this consequential. Like This is the centerpiece to their entire globalist political project. It's filling the United States with tens of millions of foreign people from third world countries. That's what they want, right? That is at the very center of all of their designs. And so any resistance, and again, this is really small resistance, right? He's closed two main points of entry for illegals to come in. I mean, some people maybe in their minds think that there are just, tanks and Bradleys and Humvees stretched out all across the Texas border with the Texas National Guard. That's not what's going on. It'd be great if it was, but it's not. It's two spots on the Rio Grande where people are fording across or swimming across, and that they've closed off with razor wire. That's it. And so if he federalizes the Texas National Guard, that is such a massive escalation. And all of it, I mean, this is what Abbott has is forcing them to own it, because they just lied about this the whole time. It's just like the oh, it's not happening, but it's good that it is, right? That's their immigration policy writ large is, oh, no, there's not an invasion. Biden has secured the border. What are you talking about? There's no invasion. You've been listening to too much Fox News, right? It's not happening. And meanwhile, it's totally happening, and they're doing everything they can to make sure that it does happen. And so, right, if he federalizes the National Guard in Texas, and then all the other states that are calling their guard as well, because I think a few of them, like Oklahoma,
Arkansas,
I think even Florida, DeSantis is right. I mean, we'll get to. We don't have time on this episode to discuss DeSantis.
Well, yeah, we do.
Now that he's the governor again,
like we should. I mean, this is
pretty good.
This is what I've been saying. This, like, he needs to be in Florida. This is exactly what we need Ron DeSantis to do. Not for run for federal office. He needs to be protecting Florida, because you can create there's some sort of like self-reinforcing atmosphere that can be created when you have these states working together like this. This is extremely useful for Ron to do, not pursue the presidency. So this is where Ron needs to be, and I think we're going to see him.
This is wheelhouse.
We're going to see him reclaim his COVID fame.
Yeah, I think so with this issue. This question: have you on Scott Adams' tweets? I haven't seen them either. So maybe in a later episode we'll get to that. We'll take a look at those.
I was interested in this one too. So it says federalization can only happen if the governor signs off. I didn't know that. I didn't that.
Either.
So
that's Forge and Anvil is ex-military, so he knows he knows the details there better than we do. So that, I mean, if he does, I mean, I think there's a process though where they are able to take unilateral control without the consent of the governor. But I could be wrong. This is a good question. I don't think it's necessarily possible. Seth Thompson, if Trump gets elected, could he decide not to enforce the Civil Rights Act? This seems like a double-edged sword. Nominally, I guess he could.
Well,
but the problem is the power structure in D.C. and the bureaucracy and everything else. They're not going to listen to him if he signs an executive order not to do it.
This is the thing. Like, so people say that Trump's going to be a dictator, but so much of the infrastructure required to enforce all these terrible things are all creations of the executive branch. And so he has the federal constitutional and executive power to override anybody. He's the head. Constitutionally, he's allowed to do this. I mean, the things they're claiming about dictatorship and all these things are completely constitutionally legitimate. They were created by executive fiat. They could be ended by executive fiat. Not the Civil Rights Act itself, right? That was legislation. But all the enforcement mechanisms, it's all executive branch.
Yeah. I mean, what he would have to do, I mean, we can get into the dictator stuff and things like that, and just the bureaucracy in general is, I mean, he would have to fire everyone in order to accomplish that. And if he did, I mean, it would be like Andrew Johnson in his term. That's more or less what he did. He appointed people and executed policy that the Congress did not, the radical Republicans of Congress didn't want, and they impeached him over it. Mm-hmm. And so if day one he goes in and he says everyone in the Department of Justice is fired, you're fired.
Yeah.
And he's like, we're gonna hire people back that are loyal to our country, right? The impeachment would begin immediately, mm-hmm. right? And they maybe would be able to remove him over doing that. Like that's part of it too. Like you have to understand, right? That That simply wouldn't be, and it doesn't matter who it would be. Like, and this is always the argument with like the DeSantis people, and God bless them. But if Ron was the guy that everybody would want him to be, right, and we take all of our cynicism glasses off, and we just drink the DeSantis Kool-Aid, and we're like, yep, he's the guy. He's gonna be super shrewd and wheel and deal in DC, right? He would run into the exact same obstacles. Right? This is the thing that I always said with Trump is I view Trump as imagine if Ron Paul got elected president in 2012, mm-hmm. right? Imagine what would happen if Ron Paul was elected president, right? Mm-hmm. And he tried to enact policy in DC. What would they do to him? Well, yeah, they would maybe kill him, but barring that, if they didn't, what would they have done? There would have been a court, immediately there'd be injunctions from myriad federal courts saying every executive order that he's done is unlawful. And if he tried to fire people at the DOJ or the Department of Defense or Treasury or wherever else, they would remove him from office.
Yeah. So how do you end the deep state? See, you have
good question.
This is what I was saying, earlier. It's like you can't be restrained. I mean, so the Constitution restrains people from doing what it takes to end the deep state. The Constitution restrains you from actually doing anything. You have to supersede it. I mean, this is like the paradox of our time is you have to assume control and you have to exercise power and authority in a way that's basically unconstitutional in order to end the unconstitutional scenario that we're in.
Yeah.
Conservatives hate to hear it. That's the reality.
That is the reality. And you're not, I mean, it's the same question is if the Constitution created the system that we have today, then the Constitution is a monstrous document. Or if it didn't create the situation we have today, it was powerless to stop it, right? That is the question, right? Mm-hmm. And people don't want to hear that, right? Because we venerate the Constitution. And it's a brilliant document. I want it to be that constitutional order we once had. CJ wants that. We all want that. But if it's doing anything, if it has any power or force today, it's to prevent a restoration of the original system that we had. Mm-hmm. That's how it exists. And so, right, the means to throttle the deep state is state power, right? That's it. It's men like DeSantis and Greg Abbott using the power that is vested in them to oppose the regime. Mm-hmm. Right. That's where the battle line is. And again, it's good to have an executive that is going to be a thorn in the side of it, that is rendered, basically toothless. That's the whole case for Trump is you have someone in there that just isn't going to play ball with them and continue to do the things that they want. Right. That's an obstacle to their power, but you're not going to get anything positive out of that largely. Right. There's not going to be any advancement. It's only a defensive measure. Right. The offense has to be at the state level. And that's what we're seeing. And so, to the right here, right. The answer to the video tagline question, no. Let's get into that question, right? Has the Civil War begun? Is that what's going on? Are we having is the Civil War going to happen? Is that what's going on here, CJ?
No. No, it's not. It's so tiny compared to what it would take to actually have a civil war. And I think a civil war is basically inconceivable with the Civil War is not the product of like basic disagreements. A civil war is a product of irreconcilable power centers that are unable to continue coexisting with each other. I mean, and at the end of the day, everybody benefits from avoiding civil war. And so there's going to be no civil war. No.
And I think people have to understand that America in 1860 is like it's like another planet compared to today. You don't have sovereign states with way more power than they have now, and you had a much, much, much weaker federal government in 1860 than you do now, where you actually had almost equal players in some senses, right? Mm-hmm. You don't have that today. You don't have secession movements in every state. I mean, maybe you could from these kinds of things, right? But that would take a generation to form and coalesce and build up, right? Mm-hmm. You don't have executives. Just just the fact that everyone lauded DeSantis, and I think rightfully so, for the opposition he took to the federal government over in his time as governor. Right, that's like a drop in the bucket compared to what was occurring in the early 1800s with the states. Right, the kind of sovereignty that they wielded compared to what we have now, which we think is like the greatest thing ever. It's like that's tiny compared to what there was. So you're not going to have DeSantis and Abbott and Sarah Huckabee Sanders, donning uniforms of the new old United States, and having armies out in the field fighting against the United States government. Like that's not going to happen. I hopefully I haven't burst any fantasies there and made people mad, but that's not what's going to occur.
Yeah, but I do think that I don't think that most people imagine that as characteristic of a new civil war. But I think it is possible. It is conceivable of a scenario where the power groups that are clashing, their interests are so irreconcilable that they have to things get heightened. There are standoffs, and things like that.
Yeah, there'll be I think you're right. I think there are standoffs, but it's like this proxy civil war more than it is just like there's not going to be a World War III because you don't really have superpowers anymore where they would be on the same place, where they'd be peers of each other. What you have is you have Russia or China or the United States fighting proxy civil wars in various domains, various smaller conflicts where they take the side. I mean, Syria was an example of this, where the United States and Russia were in some sense at war with each other, just like Ukraine is this way, where the United States and NATO and is fighting Russia, but not officially, right? American troops aren't shooting at Russian troops, just like you have that even a little bit more in Syria, actually. But those are the kinds of conflicts that occur like on the geopolitical stage. And so domestically, it's going to be standoffs like this. It's going to be fights over various issues. And the right is just beginning to take action like this, right? That's the heartening thing. That's the exciting thing about this is there's actually conflict. There's actual opposition. It isn't just statements and lawsuits. Mm-hmm. Oh, we're going to sue the federal government. Well, good for you. You're going to go to federal court to sue the federal government, right? So, well, good luck with that, right? No, you have to actually exercise power and say, I don't care. We're going to do what is within our rights to do as a state. Mm-hmm. That has to be the way forward. And I mean, I don't know what's going to come of this. At some point, someone is going to have to back down.
Yeah,
that is, that's what's going to happen. Like someone is going to back down. Either Texas does or the federal government does. Someone's going to have to back down and try to save face. Yeah. And I mean, at the same, like on one hand, it's an election year. Right now, as of today, the issue of the campaign is immigration, and the Democrats, Biden, all of them, they don't want it to be immigration, right? Mm-hmm. They are obviously as weak as they can be on this issue, right? They want it to be on abortion, mm-hmm. right? You see that, like Biden, gave this thing on abortion. Oh, we're gonna, he gave some rambly thing about the power of women, blah blah blah, and it's like they want it to be on that. They don't want it to be on immigration at all, and it is
unavoidable.
Yeah.
It's unavoidable.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. And so, I mean, I think just politically, they're going to have to back down in some way so they can cool it off. So it's no longer this huge issue.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the entire point. Just like in order to not be weak right now, they basically have to give up their chances in 2024 if they don't want to appear weak. It's a really bad situation that they're in.
They are over a barrel for sure. This point here, I want you to talk about, CJ. Side note: Abbott is not the lesser magistrate, as many have said. Constitutionally, he is the greater magistrate. What do you think there? Do you agree?
Which Constitution? Which Constitution? Yeah. So, but like, in the original Constitution, for sure. I mean, the federal government is the product of the state coalescing around a single need. For self-defense, basically. That was the original Constitution, is the states were basically the initiating party of the entire process. Now, however, obviously, in terms of realpolitik and just a realistic analysis of power, the state governors are at the behest of Washington. That's the structure that's been created for us. This was even prior to the civil rights revolution. This was largely like a managerial New Deal revolution. Everything was changed during the progressive era. So in terms of actual clash of political interests, Abbott is the lesser magistrate, and he has to become a man of history. I mean, that's the only way to reassert the original Constitution. You basically have to undermine the current constitutional structure, which is nationalistic and centralized.
Yeah, I agree. This is another good question here from hopefully I'm pronouncing it right here. Mance Jolly. Based on a thing like this, how factional are the elite? Is this even real opposition? That's a good question.
Yeah, that is the question. I think that they're less factional than they like to pretend that they are.
Mm-hmm.
At the end of the day, they want to save their own hide. Nobody wants to be a hero, really. I mean, people want to be reelected, but that's not really factional.
Well, even beyond the elected politicians, I mean, you see and maybe this is part of the question. Like you see, I don't know if you saw CJ the video of Jamie Dimon at the World Economic Forum, basically almost conceding that Trump is Biden is a disaster. Trump is probably going to win, and we need to make our peace with that. Is largely what he said, right? And so if they're conceding this, right, and this is
but Trump was pro Dimon. They were on the same team.
Yeah, he was. But I mean, are those factions within the elite right there? The ones that are comfortable.
Yeah, there are factional wars going on too. The other thing is in terms of this festering out into civil war, I don't think they're that much of a faction.
No, not like that. No, I would agree.
Yeah. So it's like I don't want to get sucked into these electoral skirmishes. At the end of the day, the regime is the regime, and it is a uniparty. We need to stick with that. Yeah. That's the way these things are played. And look at how Abbott behaved during COVID. Yeah. Like this. So he's not a man of history. I don't think it's going to go that far. This is so early in the game. Optimism is cowardice. So
yeah. Well, I agree with that. I think that analysis is good, although it does open up space for the actual men of history to emerge.
No, for sure. They have to be really careful here because things, when you have momentum and it's not controllable, this is what the Republican Party has always had to do. This was their function in the post-war world, is they had to absorb that energy. They have to pretend like they're taking care of business. They're opposing the Democratic Party. Otherwise, things get out of control. People take things into their own hands. So they have to play. They have to straddle the line between opposition party and regime team player.
Yeah, they're the release valve for the system, right? That's what they've always been. Like you see this with the Tea Party in 2008, 2009, that whole thing, and Ron Paul's thing kind of emerged out of that, right? What did they immediately do? They glom onto it and they adopt the rhetoric, and then they either do nothing or they actually come out on the side of the regime, but in a way where they can pretend that they're on the side of this populist outrage. And that's what Reagan was, right? An actual analysis of Reagan, same thing, right? There's this populist American outrage over the system. And this conservative backlash of normal Americans. And what does he do? Right, he gets into office and he amnesties millions of illegals, and he expands the federal government and does all these. I mean, and in some ways, Trump's the same way. Like this is right. The DeSantoids that are listening to this hate listening, probably. Right, and once they have a point. Right?
Pedro, yeah, I mean, Pedro's
things,
Yeah, Pedro went nuts. Poor Pedro, but he was right. I mean, Trump really did a really bad job on him, things like immigration. And this is why Ann Coulter's fed up with him. I think things could be hypothetically, if people were advising Trump to be radical, they would advise him to wait until the second term to do those things. So that kind of does make sense. But again, at the end of the day, Trump is a cosmopolitan liberal from New York. He loves the system. He loves the post-war consensus.
Yeah. He's operated within the system for a long time. The the big thing in bringing back Trump and supporting it is that he is beside him, outside of the man himself and his ambitions and goals and everything else. He is an obstacle to the regime, whether he wants to be or not.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That's how they view him, and so that's the big case for him. Is not that he is
he also builds the momentum in terms of like even if he does nothing, people are like, all right, well, Trump did nothing. We need somebody even more radical, right? So like he just continues to build that, and that's healthy.
Oh, this is funny. If there's a civil war in the U.S., there are a few thousand war volunteers. Well, yeah, maybe. I mean, that's the thing that I've said is. I mean, we discussed this. Maybe I don't know if we did it on the show, but maybe privately we discussed this, where it's like I would be like I want an immigration moratorium except for the Boers in South Africa, right? They can have asylum because they're being murdered on their farms and things like that, right? But I'm sorry, DeWitt Martins. There's not going to be a civil war in the United States. So thank you, thank you for your support. But that's not going to happen, and we're not going to. And I think it is so. I mean, even just the unlikelihood of it, like CJ said earlier, it would be such a disaster because you don't have any kind of organized force. Right, you don't have states with their own militaries that are going to.
Well, it's not even that we don't want it to happen. That's kind of a separate topic, but I don't see because the Civil War is a clash of like power centers, and the power centers don't want it, so therefore it can't happen.
Yeah, and that gets back to the question in the chat earlier about like factions within the elite, right? In other words, there's probably in other words, our faction is not among the power elite. Yeah, there isn't one. There isn't a faction of our people. There isn't a huge banking system or something that supports our people. I mean, that's part of like the U.S. Civil War is
right.
There was a power center. I mean, it was people are it was about slavery and blah blah blah, and it's like states' rights. It's like no, you had northern interests, northern economic interests that were being subverted by the South, right? They didn't, and this is the most interesting thing about the U.S. Civil War is the push to like the order of the bombing of Fort Sumter did not happen, right? All these states secede and all of this, and it was an open question of whether they were going to allow it or not. But the cabinet didn't meet and say, yes, Lincoln, go ahead and bomb Fort Sumter until the Confederate Constitution came out and it said 0 tariffs.
Yeah.
Or there's we're not going to have any tariffs, with foreign countries. We're going to have total free trade with England and France and Germany and so forth. Right. That's when they're like, all right, gloves are off. We're going in. Right. It's an economic war.
Yeah.
Right. Because the South, they wanted this free trade because they didn't have the industrial operation that the North had. And the North wanted to have this mercantilist economic zone in the United States. Right. That's what the war, like ultimately, why did it happen? Why did they fight? Right. That's why. I mean, all the other issues, are obviously compound. Right. Why did they secede? Right. Well, of course, over the issue of slavery. But why did the war happen itself? Right? It's because you had two blocks of economic interests, political and economic interests, that were totally at loggerheads. That's why there was a war, right? And it's like basic analysis, but people don't they don't want to get into that because they want to moralistic issues and ideological issues over slavery and so forth.
Yeah.
But that's what, and so we don't have that, right? There isn't this power block, an economic and political power block in the United States that's saying, this is our side, the evil people on the other side are doing this and opposing us, right? That currently does not exist in the United States whatsoever.
Yeah. I also want to talk about, I mentioned to you before, like the theological rationale for open borders and just like how clearly you see that coming across from all the, the infiltrated and subverted pastors and heads of, seminaries and other institutions. I mean, that's, it's the same thing. Yeah. So exactly. They're all, first of all, yes, we know how to take them now. They can continue to crime, but we're realizing now that, they're just basically they're slapping Jesus labels on all of their leftist objectives and priorities. That's all that's happening.
And it's obvious to everyone. Yeah. That like you saw the Bradley Mason tweet where he's like, oh, razor wire and children and how Christian is that or whatever. And I I just quote tweeted and say like, oh, if you bring along your children to do crimes, crime is legal. and
Yeah.
the tweet goes viral. Not as viral as your Barron Trump tweet, but
Yeah.
because people are they're done with this. People get the game that they're playing, right? None of these people care what the Bible says about anything,
Right.
except when they can take it out of context to say, "Oh, the sojourner and the widow, and Israel needs to care for them." And it's
Yeah.
like, well, okay, like
Therefore, you can't have a country anymore.
yeah, read that in its context, right? Israel is this totally closed society where no one is allowed to own physical property, like other than Israelites and they're born into it,
Yeah.
right?
Like
And
it was like ethno nationalism, perfected.
yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, literally, blood and soil is what the Mosaic Law was in the
Mhm.
system for Israel, and right, foreigners, yeah, they could be there, but they had no political power whatsoever, none.
Mhm.
None. They had no civil rights, right? They could be there. People, there's a moral imperative to care for them and take care of them, but there isn't. And like you apply that if you're the king of Judah and 50,000 people from Assyria come in and flood your borders, right? Are you going to say, oh, these are just sojourners and widows that we need to care for, or are you going to say this is and most of them are male,
Yeah.
right? Whether they're armed or not, what would you view that as but an invasion force?
Yeah.
That's what it is.
Yeah.
And where are they going to go? They can't own property here,
Yeah.
right? I mean, like,
Exactly.
just to take that, I mean, it's so eisegetical when they do that, and people are onto this game, this little shell game that they play. It's and that's what's heartening.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
like it depends on who you're talking to, but like you could share the fact that there's a distinction between Jesus's commands to private Christian citizens wherever they are, and the fact that Jesus obviously was not addressing civil magistrates. He was not giving it political advice to leaders of countries, obviously. But on the other hand, why would you even get bogged down in debates like that? Yeah, just make fun of these people. They have no idea what they're talking about, and they're just subversive.
Yeah, exactly. That's all it is. And people, I think, are onto it and and not playing these games anymore. But at the same time, I think some of it too is that there is such a popular outcry against mass third world migration. I mean, 66% of the country favor mass deportation. Right. I mean, I'm going to keep repeating that.
Yeah, not you didn't say closing the border. You said deportation.
Getting them out of here. Right.
Yes.
66% of the country says yes, that's good. Where because you look at and we've talked about this, but we talked about it last week with the Alistair Begg stuff. Right. You have the people on top in the evangelical hierarchy, and then they influence the mid-level pastors that have large churches, and those pastors influence all the pastors of the thousands and thousands of smaller churches, right? That's how influence works in evangelicalism, right?
Mhm.
That's where they get their talking points from, right? In my little small town, I remember in 2016 or 2017, there was kind of a controversy because one of the pastors had this like pro illegal immigration thing that he went off on, and this is a very conservative small town, and it's like people reacted strongly against that. But where was he getting these talking points from? Well, it's from the Gospel Coalition. It's from it's Russell Moore and all these popular pastors way above him in the hierarchy that trickle on down to him. And I think they're afraid to say this stuff now because it is, and many of them are, not all of them, right? David French and Russell Moore are going to continue banging this drum. But it's become so unpopular that they have to kind of shut up about it.
Mm-hmm.
Right. That's what's occurred. And so, yeah, you're going to have the Shane Claibornes and your Brad Masons and your various commie Christians that are going to keep going with this stuff, but they get ratioed to the moon whenever they do. And so, no, I think, things have definitely changed from even where things were at in 2016. Right, because you would have these guys crowing online all day long about the sojourner and the widow and the foreigner in your land and how they become these very selective rush duties. Right,
Mm-hmm.
they're very theonomic on this like one issue. The only thing the Bible is clear about is allowing third world mass migration, not having borders.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
Homosexuality,
very vague. Yep.
Who's to say? We don't really know. But borders, very clear. right?
Yeah.
That's their view of perspicuity of Scripture, right? It's just comical. It's nuts,
Yeah.
and so I think people are onto it, and that. But this is stuff you said, repeatedly on our show, is the post-war consensus and the church's role in the post-war consensus is to provide proof texts for the
Mm-hmm.
post-war consensus,
Mm-hmm.
right? Just slap Bible verses on whatever they want to do, and people are wisening up to this, right? People see that no, actually, I mean, this is like Wolf's whole project is there's this huge stream of thought from the reformers and even well before the reformers on politics and how nations exist and how they function
Yeah.
and the church's role in that. And it's totally out of alignment with the post-war consensus.
Yeah, Stephen Wolf has been obviously a great resource for these types of rediscovering. But like he's been quoting from Malthusius, we always talk about the fact that host countries, what are their obligations to the foreigner? But he's been posting stuff about what are the foreigner's obligations to their host country. You know, like not
Just to sit
critiquing.
on the welfare roll, CJ, just to
Yeah,
accept
yeah.
aid.
I mean, not being a burden, not undermining the culture. Doing your best to just stay silent and quiet and respectable. I mean, like you look at the hordes of invaders that are sitting on the border. You think these people are even? It's even possible to conceive of them as potential participants in classical American society? No, they're revolutionaries, and
Yeah.
they have to be. By their own cultural background, they're revolutionaries, and that's the point of bringing them in.
Yeah, I just remember, like years ago, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, Tom Woods got in some trouble, like a huge controversy. People were angry at him because he mentioned how he was like, "Hey, I'm out in public, and there are people from another country speaking loudly on their speakerphones in a foreign language." And I'm thinking, like, if I were in France or Japan or any
Yeah,
country, and they're speaking, and the host country is
yeah,
speaks a different language, I wouldn't loudly and ostentatiously, speak my language for everybody to hear. Right? I wouldn't do that
yeah,
because it's rude, it's impolite, and it's disrespectful to the people of that country.
yeah,
Right? And that's just commonplace. You go to any major city in the U.S.
yeah.
and you're going to hear foreign languages spoken loudly on the speakerphone wherever you go,
Hmm.
and conversations and everything else like that loudly in another language, just to show we're not from here and we don't respect your way of life. I mean, I even think about my own ancestors when they came over from Germany, many 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 generations ago, like 6 7 generations ago. Um, Immediately they started learning English, right? They
Hmm.
started assimilating to American culture and ways of life, right, in order to respect the people that were already there.
Hmm.
Right? That's just what you did. They spoke German at home.
Hmm.
They still maintain that for a few more generations, but they spoke English everywhere else, right? That is the major difference, right? And so I mean, just on the language issue is like this microcosm of everything else. Um, with everything with the whole issue, it's like, well, if they're not going to speak the language, they're not going to participate in the way of life of regular Americans. But they're going to bring
Yeah.
their own culture and their own way of life, and the entire system is saying that's okay,
Hmm.
right? We need to accommodate you,
Hmm.
right? Because America is just a 350 million person shopping center.
Yeah.
That's all it is, an industrial zone, right? That's what America is. It's not a country with a particular way of life. No, nations don't exist. They're evil.
Hmm.
Right? That's the viewpoint. That's what it is.
Yep. No, I agree. And like it's also interesting because like, when there's something about culture teaches your children how
Yeah,
to be human beings. j- you know, to the same extent that parents do. I mean, you have
yeah,
to have this reinforcement mechanism, and we teach our children what it means to actually be Americans and to have that heritage, and then you take them out to society, and it's like this continue like dumping ground chaos zone where everybody's just kind of doing these like chaotic third world behaviors. I mean, that does affect you. It does affect your ability to raise children. It does affect your ability to pass on your own habits and behaviors and norms to future generations.
yeah. Like I'm here. I don't know if everyone could see. I'm in the Southern Command of Contramundum. I'm in Florida, with my family this week, and we went. I don't know where we went. We were at a park or Legoland. That's where we were. And my son, just he got his ice cream cone and like the napkin or the wrapper, whatever. He like threw it down on the ground and just walked away. And I'm like, no, son, we don't do that. We take our trash, we put it in the garbage. And the thing is, like, if he's growing up in a world where everybody just throws their trash all wherever they want, which is a lot of the country, especially the large cities in the country, just trash everywhere, right? What you learn, right? Well, this is what everybody does. They just throw their trash wherever.
Exactly.
Right. The whole thing of like littering is kind of comical, right? You drive, like here in Florida, we're driving by $1,000 fine for littering on the highway. And it's like, we don't have $1,000 fines in, Waseca County, Minnesota for littering. I mean, people still do. But the trash gets picked up. People just don't do that.
Yeah.
Right?
We don't do that here. It's like,
we don't do that. Yeah. That's right.
Caught me.
We don't do that here. Like, yeah, like that's what culture is. We don't do that here.
Mm-hmm.
And the whole point is, like, you bring in new populations where they do that here, right? You're changing the way of life of all of the people in the country, right? And these are all just little examples of it. I mean, all of it, every behavior, every way of life is radically, revolutionarily transformed, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's what mass migration means.
Yep.
That's why people should be infuriated about it.
Yeah.
So anyway, yeah, Ken Paxton. This is a good point. If Ken Paxton was governor, this would be a different situation. Maybe it would.
Did he run for governor?
I don't think he did. Correct me if I'm wrong. But he's way more hardcore than Abbott is. That's absolutely certain. And for that reason, they tried to get rid of him in Texas. I've tried. I'm curious. If the people that are on the ground there in Texas and more familiar with the political dynamics there, like just what the role of Ken Paxton being victorious in his impeachment trial, right? How that plays a role in what Abbott is doing right now.
Well, obviously, I think Paxton is a strategic advisor for this. I mean, as the Attorney General,
of course.
Yeah.
And so but I think, like, just even from the internal politics of Texas, right? The MAGA faction of Texas won, right? And the globalist faction in the Texas Republican Party and the Democrats, they lost.
Well, temporarily set back. Yeah.
They're temporarily set back. Yes. Okay. Yes. And so does that give him a little bit more runway to be more aggressive? Right. I think that plays a role. I think it does. And so more of that. That's what you have to see. And this is the thing that we've said a lot is the state politics is at this point way more important than national politics, because that machine is just going to keep on running the way it does. And even electing Donald Trump and even electing, dozens and dozens of solid congressmen, right, is only gonna affect things just a tiny little bit. But states actually having some sand, right, that changes things. That's where the battle actually is. That's why this is so encouraging, right? Not going to be a civil war, I don't think, right? You can, I definitely don't want to be wrong about that. And so people can play this back in 6 months if there is one. But if there is, then we're people are not going to care what we thought. They're going to have bigger concerns. But I don't think there's going to be one. But this is the encouraging thing, is that states are actually standing up and fighting back against the federal government. Because it's insane. I mean, just to think about it, just if you went back 50 years ago and said to people, hey, the U.S. federal government is going to facilitate the invasion of millions of people from the third world, and anyone who fights against it, actually the Supreme Court is going to rule against them and allow them to happen, and the whole system is going to be pushing this, right? They would think, what has happened to your country? What has happened to our country? Something has gone massively wrong that would ever occur, that the federal government would be facilitating an invasion. What would they call it? What word would they use for this? I think it starts with a T.
Right. Treason.
Yeah, this is treason. I mean, this is it. It's not Donald Trump, and the Russians buying $10,000 of Facebook ads. right? That's not treason.
Yeah.
This is what's treason, right?
Yeah.
This is treasonous. I mean, with a capital T, that's what it is. Like facilitating foreign people invading your country is treasonous behavior. These are traitors to the United States of America.
Yeah.
And so the only way to fight it, like you're not going to fight it within the federal government. It's only going to be through means like this, through the states.
No, I agree. I also think that the federal government has been the engine of like cultural subversion in America since the 30s. Not since the
Yep.
30s. I mean, since the 30s, it built the infrastructure, but since the
Yeah.
60s,
Yeah.
there was an actual cultural subversion. So
Yep.
this isn't something new. Like this is what the federal government does. It's that we're on the way, we're way far down the road in terms of like what the federal government does to like create, cultural revolution in America. We are the result of that. It's been
Yeah.
happening since before my parents were born.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, same. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think that's all we got to say. We'll see what later today what the federal government's response actually is.
Yeah.
But I know you're out of time here, CJ, and so am I. And any parting thoughts on this issue before we sign off?
No, I would say it's interesting to see like the tech. It's interesting to see the Texas government use language and phraseology that has come right out of our suggestions to him.
Yeah,
I mean, like winds are changing, and
Yep.
we're all participating in it. We're all shifting the mood here, and I think that's good.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Well, for us, yeah. Well, actually, we should address this comment really quick before we get going. I almost signed off. How would you recommend combating the "you want to let brown kids drown" rhetoric from the left? I would say, why is the left incentivizing people to illegally cross the border? Right? They're the ones that don't care if people drown. They're the ones that don't care if drug cartels operate in our country and rape people and murder people and hack them up to death. They're the ones that don't care about human lives.
Yeah.
Right. If you had a secure border, those people wouldn't be there in the first place.
Right.
It
Exactly.
would never happen. That's how you combat it.
Yeah.
I mean, some of it is just like, some of it is just the meme. Oh, here's some sad stuff that happened. So
burn the Constitution.
No more
Yeah.
borders.
Yeah.
Right. And it's like, well, no, these are casualties of this conflict.
Yeah.
Of these people trying to destroy our country, and they're happy to use the deaths of people. They don't care about these people at all.
Yeah.
Right. It's to view it with cynicism and not to treat it in like good faith.
Mm-hmm.
Right. That's the way to combat it. Is like, you don't care about these people. You don't care about them at all. All you care about is power, and that's what they are means to you for power, so that you can destroy our country and our whole way of life. That's what they mean to you, right? They don't mean anything beyond that at all.
Yeah.
So that's how you do it. Anyway, that's that 5 pictures of migrant children. Yeah. That's 100% it. Well, I mean, that's all the time we got for today. We could go on this for much longer, and we'll discuss the primary and things like that. Hopefully in the next episode. But
cool.
For this week, that's all we got. Thank you all so much. Please like and subscribe and share the conversation with friends. These are great episodes, great conversation to have. Thank you all for joining the chat. And until next week, we will see you next time.
Okay. See you later.